He felt the power in his voice before he even spoke. It was the kind of tone that made people smaller without raising a hand. "You're nobody," he said, the words landing like a slap in a room full of men who already believed they owned the world. She stood still, not because she was afraid, but because she had learned the hardest lesson of all. Anger is a weapon that often backfires. She could feel the room watching her eyes like sharpened knives waiting for her to crack. Her hands were steady, but her heart wasn't. It beat against her ribs like it wanted out, like it was begging to be heard. She had heard that phrase before, many times. Nobody, as if her rank, her experience, her sacrifices, and her identity could be erased with a single sentence. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who is listening. The meeting room was a concrete box, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look older than they were. The air tasted of metal and coffee, and the faint hum of the air conditioner sounded like a distant engine that never stopped. A projector flickered in the corner, displaying a mission plan that mattered more to the men in suits than the woman standing at the edge of the table. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Elena Shaw, though no one used it. To them. She was just the support officer, the liaison, the quiet woman who could be ignored without consequence. But Elena had never been quiet by accident. She had learned to listen, to observe, to understand the invisible threads that connected people in a room like this. She had learned to wait. She had learned to survive. She had learned to move when the moment was right. The man who called her a nobody, Commander Reynolds, was a man built for power. Tall, confident, and loud enough to drown out anyone else. He was the kind of officer who believed rank was the only truth, and that everyone else was just a footnote. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking beneath him, and smirked. "You don't belong here," he said. "You're not one of us." Elena's face stayed calm. Her eyes, however, held a storm. She could have fought him. She could have argued. She could have exposed him. But she knew that in a room like this, confrontation would only make her seem weak. It would make her the one who needed validation. So instead she did something else. She reached for her phone. The gesture was so small it went almost unnoticed. But in that moment, the air shifted. The room went quieter, as if the walls themselves were listening. Reynolds noticed, of course. He laughed, low and confident, like a man who knew he was in control. "What are you doing?" he asked, mocking her. "Calling your friends? Your daddy?" Elena's jaw tightened. She could feel her blood rising, but she forced herself to breathe. She remembered a phrase her mentor had once told her: "Never let someone else's arrogance define your actions." She dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring stretched the room thinner, as if time itself was holding its breath. Then, on the 4th ring, something changed. A voice answered. Not just any voice. A voice that carried weight. A voice that made men like Reynolds go still. "Shaw," the voice said, calm but sharp. Elena's fingers didn't tremble. She kept her voice steady. "Sir," she replied, "I need you to confirm my identity." The room froze. The men at the table stopped shifting. The women in the corner stopped scribbling notes. Even the air seemed to still, as if the building itself recognized the significance of that moment. Reynolds' smirk faltered. "Who is this?" demanded, but his voice had lost its edge. The voice on the other end was quiet, but the quiet carried authority. "This is Admiral Hayes," he said. "Lieutenant Commander Elena Shaw is under my command." The silence that followed was heavy enough to be felt. Reynolds' face went pale. Not from fear, but from the sudden realization that he had been speaking to someone he had no right to insult. Someone whose authority was not just earned, it was recognized. Lena looked at him, and for the first time in the room, she allowed herself a small, quiet satisfaction. Not because she had one, but because she had reminded the world of something they had forgotten. "Respect isn't given," it's confirmed. Reynolds' voice cracked as he tried to recover. I didn't know," he stammered. The room whispered. A few men exchanged glances, embarrassed. Some even looked ashamed, as if they had been complicit in the insult. Elena held the phone away from her ear and looked at the faces around her. She didn't feel victorious. She felt tired of proving herself, out of carrying the weight of someone else's ignorance. But she also felt something else. A quiet hope. Because in that moment, The room had changed. Not because she had been validated, but because they had been reminded of a truth they could no longer ignore. Strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner and waits for the right moment to show the world what it is. Admiral Hayes' voice came through the line again, and this time he spoke to everyone in the room. "Respect her," he said simply. "She's not a nobody." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Some nodded, some looked away, but the mood had shifted. Alina ended the call and placed her phone on the table like a weapon she no longer needed. She didn't look triumphant. She looked human. She looked exhausted. She looked like someone who had finally been seen. The men who had laughed now avoided her eyes. The room felt smaller, as if their arrogance had been squeezed out of it. Alina stood up. The chair legs scraped the floor softly, but the sound echoed like a final note in a symphony. She walked out of the room without a word. Behind her, the air remained quiet. And for the first time in a long time, the world seemed to understand that a person's worth is not decided by those who fear them. Because the truth is simple. Power doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being real. And as the door closed behind her, the last thing the room remembered was not the insult, but the moment the line went quiet, because respect isn't something you demand, it's something you prove. If this story moved you, drop a comment below. Subscribe to Whispered Words for more mission stories that remind us what courage really looks like. Because strength isn't always visible. Sometimes it's just waiting, patiently, for the right moment to be heard.